The Ouija board, often referred to as a talking board, has long been associated with paranormal activity and ghostly encounters. For many, it's a simple game, something to be used at sleepovers for cheap thrills. But for others, the Ouija board has been the gateway to horrifying, real-life events. One such incident occurred with the Williams family in the late 1990s, when a seemingly harmless experiment with a Ouija board turned into a nightmare that they would never forget. The Williams family lived in a small town in rural Maine. The family consisted of John Williams, a middle-aged father who worked as an accountant, his wife Susan, and their two teenage daughters, Megan, 17, and Olivia, 14. The Williams family was relatively normal, with no history of paranormal experiences, and they were never particularly superstitious. However, all of that changed after one fateful night. It was October 1997, and Megan had a group of friends over for a sleepover. They decided to play with an old Ouija board that one of her friends, Rachel, had brought along. None of them really believed in the supernatural. It was all meant to be a bit of fun, a way to scare each other before settling in to watch some horror movies. Susan, the mother, was a little uneasy about the idea but didn't think much of it. She had used a Ouija board herself when she was younger, and nothing had ever happened. That night, the girls gathered in the dimly lit basement, sitting in a circle on the floor. The room was cold, but they thought it was just because it was a chilly autumn evening in Maine. They placed the Ouija board in the center of their circle, set the planchette on the board, and lit a few candles for effect. Laughing nervously, Megan took the lead and asked, "Is anyone there?" At first, nothing happened. The planchette sat still, unmoving, and the girls exchanged glances, unsure if they were doing it right. They asked a few more questions, but the board remained silent. Then, without warning, the planchette began to move. The girls gasped, unsure whether one of them was pushing it as a joke. The planchette slid across the board, spelling out a single word, "Yes." Rachel, always the bravest of the group, smirked. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice confident. The planchette began to move again, spelling out the name, David. "David?" Megan asked, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the planchette. "Are you dead?" Once again, the planchette moved, sliding to yes. The girls, now a little unnerved, exchanged glances. Olivia, Megan's younger sister, was watching from the doorway. She hadn't been invited to join the game, but she couldn't resist peeking in to see what was happening. Megan, trying to stay calm, asked another question. "How did you die?" The planchette moved faster this time, spelling out, "Murdar." The girls froze, their eyes wide. This was no longer fun. The air in the basement felt heavier, colder, and the candle flames flickered wildly as if a breeze had passed through the room, except there were no open windows. Rachel, now feeling uneasy, said, "Let's stop. This isn't funny anymore." But Megan, curious despite her fear, asked one last question. "Who killed you?" The planchette moved again, and this time it spelled out a name that sent chills down everyone's spine, John. Megan's breath caught in her throat. John was her father's name. At that moment, Olivia screamed. She had been standing by the doorway when she felt something cold brush past her, like icy fingers trailing across her back. She backed away, terrified, as the candles in the room flickered out, plunging the basement into darkness. The girls scrambled upstairs, their hearts racing, leaving the Ouija board and the extinguished candles behind. They didn't dare go back down that night. After that night, strange things began to happen in the Williams home. It started small, objects would go missing, only to reappear in odd places. Lights would flicker on and off by themselves, and doors would creak open in the middle of the night. The family brushed it off at first, assuming it was just the wind or faulty wiring. But then, things escalated. Megan started waking up at night, feeling as though someone was watching her. She would hear soft whispers, but when she sat up to look around, no one was there. Olivia also began having terrifying nightmares about a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. The figure would call her name in a low, menacing voice, and she would wake up drenched in sweat, unable to sleep for the rest of the night. John, who had always been a skeptic, began to experience things he couldn't explain. One evening, while working late in his home office, he heard footsteps coming down the hallway. Assuming it was one of the girls, he called out, but no one answered. When he went to check, the hallway was empty. Another time, he swore he saw a dark figure standing in the corner of the living room, but when he blinked, it was gone. Susan, too, felt the growing tension in the house. She would hear disembodied voices, especially at night, whispering her name or calling out for help. On one particularly frightening occasion, she was in the kitchen alone when all the cabinet doors flew open simultaneously, and the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. She screamed for John, but by the time he arrived, everything had returned to normal. The most disturbing incident occurred about 2 weeks after the Ouija board session. One night, Megan woke up to the sound of her closet door slowly creaking open. She stared in horror as a shadowy figure stepped out from the darkness, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It stood at the foot of her bed, watching her. Frozen with fear, Megan couldn't move or scream. The figure whispered her name in a raspy voice, the same voice she had heard during the Ouija board session. "David," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The figure stepped closer, its form becoming clearer. It was a man, or what had once been a man. His face was pale and gaunt, with deep, sunken eyes and blood dripping from a wound in his chest. He leaned over Megan, his breath cold against her skin, and whispered, "John killed me." Megan screamed, and the figure vanished. Her parents rushed into the room to find her sobbing, shaking uncontrollably. Megan told them what had happened, and though they had been skeptical before, the look in her eyes made them realize that something was seriously wrong. Terrified and desperate, the Williams family sought the help of a local paranormal investigator, Mark Harrison, who had experience dealing with Ouija board-related hauntings. When Mark arrived at the house, he immediately felt the heavy, oppressive energy that seemed to linger in every room. He explained to the family that by using the Ouija board, they had opened a door to the spirit world and invited something into their home, something dark and angry. Mark conducted an investigation, setting up cameras and recording devices throughout the house. He also performed a series of rituals to cleanse the home and close the spiritual door that had been opened. During the investigation, he captured chilling evidence, including eerie whispers, shadowy figures, and the sound of footsteps in empty rooms. Most disturbing of all, in the basement where the Ouija board session had taken place, the recording devices picked up a clear voice saying, **** John killed me, ****. After the cleansing rituals, the activity in the house began to die down, but the Williams family was never the same. Megan and Olivia both struggled with nightmares for months, and Susan became deeply involved in researching the paranormal, determined to understand what had happened. John, the skeptic, remained haunted by the experience, though he rarely spoke about it. The family eventually moved out of the house, unable to shake the feeling that something dark still lingered there. The Ouija board that had caused all the trouble was thrown away, but the memory of what happened remained with the Williams family for the rest of their lives. The incident with the Williams family is a chilling reminder of the potential dangers of using a Ouija board. While many people dismiss it as a harmless game, there are countless stories of people who have had terrifying experiences after using the board. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, the Williams family's ordeal serves as a warning. Some doors, once opened, are not so easily closed.